What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to have another episode of Let's Talk Dynasty, and we're doing a trade review show for you guys. So hopefully you guys have submitted your Dynasty trades into our Discord. If you have, we will be reviewing those here on today's episode. But I got to get my co-host in the building. So without wasting any more time, let's get MFGD's, aka War, in the building. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm ready. I'm ready to look at some awesome trades. I'm ready to do this, man.
Let's do it, man. I was taking a peek in there already. It looks like we have some submitted. There's about 5 or 6 trades in there, so we'll go through each of those pretty quickly. But I'm going to share my screen here, and let's start talking about some of these Dynasty trades. And the first trade that we have is from Marsh. It says 10-team PPR Superflex competitive rebuild, and it is going to be Austin Eckler for Saquon Barkley. So both sides accepted. War, what is your thoughts on a competitive rebuild trading away Austin Eckler for Saquon Barkley?
Oh man, I had some reservations about this one. I feel like on the surface it's an okay trade. I mean, you got one person getting, I guess, the younger of the two. I happen to know some of the feelings behind the Eckler trade about his rushing numbers and him not getting enough carries and him just primarily living and dying on his pass catching abilities. I mean, I guess this is an even trade. I mean, I'm kind of worried though about the ineptitude of the Giants offense overall and how it affects Saquon, but I don't have a problem with this one. This was an all right trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of these guys are pretty close as far as value goes. Just looking at the ages here, Austin Eckler, he's currently being valued as the running back 9. He is 28 and a half years old. You look over at Saquon Barkley, currently being valued as the running back 10, but he is 26 and a half years old. So I guess you get about 2 years younger moving from Eckler to Saquon. I think both of these guys are pretty equally valued. So I don't think we got to spend too much time here. It's a fair deal. It's a good deal. If you're in a competitive rebuild, I guess why not get a few years younger? Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Competitive rebuild. That's a nice term.
Alrighty. Well, the next trade that we have here is a 10-team Superflex full PPR half tight end premium. Says the first is late, but he lost Cousins and Rodgers, so he didn't have a QB2. I wish we could zoom in on this just a little bit. Let's see if we can. There we go. So it is DeAndre Hopkins and Jordan Love for a 2024 first, which he says is late. What do you think about getting Love and Hopkins for a late first?
For late first, I think that's a good deal for Killer B, getting those two for a late first. Now, if we were talking about a first like near the top, this would be a horrible trade. That's how polarizing like this trade is right here, because you're just a few spots away from it being a bad trade. But with the loss of Cousins, helps the overall roster. Getting that for a late first, I think that's an okay deal for Killer B. And depending on where Shock ENT is, or Shocking, it's probably a good deal for him too if he's seeking a first round draft capital.
Yeah, I mean, what to me this says is obviously he kind of already said it in the message, but he's a competitive team. He needs more ammunition with some of the injuries that have been happening here in the NFL lately. And Jordan Love's going to plug and play in that super flex slot for him. I think ultimately you and I would agree that Jordan Love isn't the most reliable of quarterback assets for your fantasy football teams. Definitely somebody that you can play when you need. But if it sounds like what it is that he's going to be playing Jordan Love there every single week, there is going to be ups and downs, but you do get a win now piece in DeAndre Hopkins as well. So I think the value is fine. The value is fair. In fact, there's probably an argument as well that Shocking could have received a little bit more value in return as well. But I understand it is a win now move. You know, moving that first to try and chase a championship this year through some of the injuries.
I definitely would have asked for more if I was Shocking.
Yeah, I mean, a late first, I feel like you could do a late first for, you think you could get a late first for Jordan Love by himself?
A late first for just Jordan Love? Probably, yeah, especially from a team that lost Cousins. Yeah, you could probably get that.
I think so too, but ultimately, I mean, the trade makes sense, and I think for Shocking, you know, if you're not a believer in Jordan Love, you know, getting a late first and re-rolling the dice maybe next year. I know DeAndre Hopkins, you know, you have to throw him into that deal, but he's older as well. It makes sense for everybody involved. I don't have any gripes about this trade overall. I think it's a fine trade for both teams.
Yeah, so do I. I like it. The second one in a row where I think the trade compensation on both sides was pretty fair.
All right. Well, let's get to the next one. It's still from Brandon. He says 10-team Superflex full PPR. It looks like we have 3 in a row from Brandon. 10-team Superflex full PPR half tight end premium. He is the Waddle owner. Also owned Tyreek and is in the hunt. Nick Goss is tanking is what he says. So what we have here is Garrett Wilson for Jalen Waddle and a 4th round pick. I know you're like me, War. That fourth round pick is irrelevant. We don't care about it. I guess it's just fluff to get it over the edge. But Nick is tanking. Brandon says that he had Waddle and Tyreek together, so he's diversifying. What are your thoughts here?
Man, I'm kind of confused by the trade. So the guy receiving Waddle is tanking, but he acquired Jalen Waddle and gave away the guy who currently doesn't have a quarterback, and both pieces are young. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think for the most part, when you're trading young asset for young asset, whether you're tanking or competing, I don't think it really matters. And in fact, there's probably an argument that I guess Killa B could make that maybe, Garrett Wilson is outperforming Jalen Waddle so far this season. So maybe that helps him lose a few points if he's tanking. But I think it's a fair deal. I know I personally prefer Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I know. I personally prefer Jalen Waddle. So we're opposite ends on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of preference, right? Who do you prefer at the wide receiver position? The fourth round pick, it doesn't do anything for me to sway me in a direction to pick Jalen Waddle. But I think, again, this is a fair trade, and I think this is probably where both are at. What is your opinions on Jalen Waddle right now? You've been very much the Jalen Waddle guy. I've been very much the Garrett Wilson guy. How do you feel about Jalen Waddle's season so far? It's been somewhat disappointing. What is your opinions on this season so far for Jalen Waddle?
I think he's had a few nicks and bumps along the season so far. I'm not overly worried about him. Maybe he turns it on towards the end of the season. I also think there's a lot of respect for Tyreek and what Tyreek's trying to accomplish from a historic perspective, and that's also had somewhat of a little impact on how the distribution of passes are going. But no, I'm not necessarily worried about him. He's had some tough luck as far as the injuries, but yeah, I don't see anything with Waddle that will be overly concerning.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think for me, when I'm looking at Garrett Wilson this year, I actually would say that I think Garrett Wilson has surprised me a little bit this year. He's been better than I expected. Obviously, was very high on Garrett Wilson, was a my guy of mine coming into the season. I thought there was a chance that Garrett Wilson was going to be a top 5 wide receiver. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers injury happens week 1, just 3 or 4 plays into the season. And all of a sudden, I got very pessimistic about Garrett Wilson because he has Zach Wilson playing quarterback for him. But for whatever reason, Garrett Wilson has been serviceable for your fantasy football teams this year. And I think that should speak to how good of a player Garrett Wilson is finding a way to succeed in a bad situation, which only tells me how good he could have been this year if Aaron Rodgers was throwing him the football for 17 games.
I want to clarify too. If we're talking about a healthy Aaron Rodgers playing with Wilson and Waddle playing with Tua, I'm going with Garrett Wilson. As much as I like Waddle, I just think the overall upside and the position on the team as the bona fide number 1 wide receiver on the Jets, I think you got to lean Wilson if both quarterbacks were completely healthy. But if we're talking about this season in general and just taking into account that Rodgers may not be here for the next 2 or 3 years after this season, then I would go Waddle. So.
Fair enough. So let's move on. We have the third trade here. It is going to be the one from Brandon. 10-team Superflex, full PPR, half-point tight end premium. It says both teams are contending. With this trade here, we do have Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, or we have Christian McCaffrey being traded for Saquon Barkley and Devon Achane. So how do you feel about this one? Christian McCaffrey obviously being one of the most dominant fantasy running backs that we've seen for a long time and having a great season. But again, we have Saquon Barkley back in the mix and one of your guys that you've liked, Devon Achane.
Yeah, this trade pissed me off. I like the McCaffrey side, even though I like Achane. I like the McCaffrey side. I also, at the same time, kind of understand why Parker wanted to get these guys. Getting Achane is just like a super bonus. And obviously, Saquon's not on McCaffrey's level, on C-Mac's level, but he is a very, very top-tier running back, and you're getting an explosive guy who's put up 40, 50-point games before going down injury. If this from the perspective of a team that's competing now, which would be Killa B, getting a guy like C-Mac, that's a win for him. But if you're also talking about a team that's competitive, rebuilding, or something of that nature, which I think Parker might be doing, this is also an excellent deal for him as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a few times in Dynasty when you get trades where maybe the value that you were receiving, because I would say that the value of the assets on the Saquon and Achane side is worth more than the value of Christian McCaffrey from a single asset standpoint. But I think that the value value Christian McCaffrey has on your fantasy football team probably outweighs his actual trade value. So I think obviously Brandon is getting the number one player in the deal, probably the number one running back in fantasy football. He's getting a ultimate win now piece. Like, this is a guy who is consistently putting up 120 yards and a touchdown every week. Like, it's guaranteed. I think I agree with you to the point of where Parker could be getting more value long term, maybe diversifying the one asset into two that has similar value. It's a fine trade. It's a good trade for both sides. I think just when you talk about it from the way that Brandon was talking about it in his thing, where both teams are contending, if I am a contending roster, I just want Christian McCaffrey. That is what I want. Christian McCaffrey gives me the best chance to win a fantasy football championship, and that's why I want him on the roster. So from a contending perspective, which both of these teams are supposed to be playing from that aspect, I would say that Christian McCaffrey is the most valuable piece.
I agree. Absolutely. It's not even debatable.
Yeah, man. Let's move on to the next one. Tyson says 10-team Superflex full PPR half-point tight end premium. He says his other QBs are Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr, and Geno Smith. He needed another young one for next year. So he trades Daniel Jones or he gets Daniel Jones for a 2024 second round pick. What are your thoughts here on Daniel Jones' value being worth a second round pick? Let's assume this pick is middle of the second round.
There's not often that I think Tyson got fleeced in a trade. This is one of those cases. You get okay, but let's just be completely honest here. If the Giants finish with a top 2 pick, which is highly plausible, Daniel Jones will not be their quarterback anymore. And while I think that he will still be able to start somewhere else next season, I definitely think it's going to be a situation where if he's not playing well, he could be benched.
I agree.
So getting a second round pick for him is a win. I think that's the most you could have gotten for him, and I think getting that for him is a win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally not in on Daniel Jones as a dynasty asset right now. I think the play kind of has spoken for itself. Obviously, the injury of the torn ACL that he's had now obviously isn't good, especially for his play style for a guy that does rely on the legs a little bit more. Not that the ACL is going to be like career ending or anything. We've seen plenty of guys come back from ACLs. What I would say, though, is more so just kind of what you've said is the Giants are not playing for anything worth a damn this year. Really, the best thing that they're playing for is losing games so they can get a better draft pick. That's really the best thing that they could do at this moment. That's probably why they're rolling out Tommy, Danny, DeVito every single week. So that's what is going on with the Giants. I don't think that Daniel Jones has a ton of job security. I know he signed the contract extension, but we've seen deals worse than the deal that Daniel Jones signed that teams kind of go back on very quickly if the play isn't matching the pay. And so I think Daniel Jones is a player that the play hasn't matched the pay up to this point. I don't think they will fully, give up on Daniel Jones this quickly, but if you're in the top 2, top 3 picks of the draft, do you want to pass on a Drake May or a Caleb Williams type of quarterback to roll the dice with Daniel Jones again?
I feel like the Giants have already had their give Daniel Jones a chance and pass on quarterbacks moment. He's in that moment right now, and he's not taking advantage of it. They gave him the contract. They didn't take another QB, when they could have. And, they stuck with Daniel, and it didn't pay dividends. And quite honestly, he's probably going to get a couple people fired on his way out. Brian Daboll doesn't look like the genius that he looked like when he got hired for the job. He doesn't look like the genius he looked like last season. So,
yeah. I've said it before. I think, and maybe this is just me as a bitter Vikings fan. So Giants fans, you guys can put it in the comments if I'm just bitter, but I think Daniel Jones owns Ed Donatel, the Vikings' old defensive coordinator. A lot of that money that he got paid in that contract extension, because I think old Ed Donatel is mainly the reason why Daniel Jones won that wild card game, and mainly the reason why Daniel Jones got paid after winning that wild card game. So I think he owns Ed a little bit of that check. Maybe there's some commissions that he'll pay back on the other end of that. But I don't know, man. That's my thoughts on this trade. All right, so we got the last trade here. It is a 10-team Superflex full PPR half-point tight end premium. Tyson is going to be the 7th seed trying to push into the playoffs. He gives up James Conner, Joshua Dobbs, Royce Freeman, Kyron Williams, and Keontae Ingram, and he receives David Montgomery and Jacoby Myers. So how do you feel about with this deal, he says he is the 7th seed trying to make the playoffs. He receives Monty and Myers.
Okay, so let's just take Royce Freeman out and Keontae Ingram out of the picture. So pretty much this is
It's Handcuffs, right?
James Conner, Kyron, and Dobbs for David Montgomery and Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, whose quarterback is Aiden O'Connell. Jacoby Myers, who is the second fiddle to Devontae Adams. David Montgomery, who is slowly but surely becoming a full-fledged second fiddle to Jahmyr Gibbs. And you're giving up James Conner, a guy whose touches are unthreatened as long as he's healthy. Dobbs, who is to a degree lighting the world on fire, who could even be potentially flipped for a draft capital or something else. And Kyron Williams, a guy who should be back soon, that was tearing it up before going down with injury. I don't know what got into Tyson making this trade. No, I'm 100% on the I'm on a Ragnar XR Lothbrok. After he said that, I am on that side.
Fair enough. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like you said, the Royce Freeman, the Ingram, these are fluff pieces. We don't care about them. You said it. It's Connor, Kyron, Josh for Jacoby, and David Montgomery. I've said on my waiver episode, I don't know if it was last week or the week before that, but I said that the play that Joshua Dobbs has shown since he's gotten to the Minnesota Vikings, and quite frankly, what he's shown this year in whole, but I think more so since he's got to Minnesota, because the weapons that Minnesota has are much greater than what Arizona was running out with. It shows that Joshua Dobbs has the ceiling to potentially be a low-end quarterback one for your fantasy football rosters the rest of the way this year, especially if Justin Jefferson is added to this roster off of IR here in the next week or so. And I think Joshua Dobbs is a very good win-now piece for a team that might need a quarterback. Maybe he didn't need a quarterback, so okay, whatever. He throws that in. Kyron Williams and James Conner for David Montgomery and Jacoby Myers. I still think you should be valuing James Conner and David Montgomery pretty similarly right now.
Yes.
I think both of those guys will score similarly to each other. I do think that David Montgomery's scheme is better than what they have in Arizona, but you got to think now that James Conner has Kyler Murray back in the lineup, you got to think that offense is going to be a lot better. There's going to be more red zone and more touchdown opportunities for James Conner than there were the first 10 weeks of the season. With that being said, I think the win now pieces are on that bottom side of that team. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Jacoby Myers. I don't think Jacoby Myers is more than a guy that you plug into your flex on a bye week or maybe with an injury there. He had a good start to the season when Jimmy Garoppolo, his old buddy from New England, was throwing him the football. But now that he's not throwing him the football, Jacoby's kind of gone MIA. It'll be interesting to see what Kyron does when he comes back from this IR, whether that short little period where he was balling was for real, or maybe it was fake, or maybe, Darrell Henderson's worked in a little bit. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think the reality of the situation is there's more value on that bottom side of the trade with Ragnar than there is on the top side of the trade. And I think both have equal ability to help you win this year. So I think there's nothing that's going to sway me either way on those.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is a panic move by Tyson.
You think?
Yeah, I'm hot on his heels. So he got a little shaky. Yeah, man. He could. I feel like Tyson would have been better. This is what I would have done if I were Tyson. I think that he should have stayed pat. Like you said, Monty and Connor's values are pretty similar, and you're not a believer in Myers. There just has to be a team. And granted, we at this period of time we didn't know guys like Joe Burrow were going to go down and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But that's the reason why you keep a Dobbs around, so you can use him at the right opportune time to get a play. I really do believe Tyson could have gotten better than what he got than Jacoby Myers. That's ultimately what we're talking about here. If James Conner and David Montgomery are washed, we're basically talking about Josh Dobbs and Kyron Williams for Jacoby Myers, and that's a finesse.
Yeah, and obviously it is a lot easier to look with hindsight.
Yeah.
But I do think that you're right when you have an asset like Kyron Williams or Josh Dobbs or something like that, where it's like, we didn't project this to happen. This is something that's kind of like come out of the blue, and they've gained a lot of value and are maybe not being properly valued to where they are long term. That is when you find those assets, you look across your league landscape, you try and find people that might potentially need a quick fix or a band-aid to a position, like what you're talking about with Joshua Dobbs. Joshua Dobbs can be a very quick band-aid to a quarterback position to a team that needs one. I mean, we talked about the trade earlier where Brandon was trading for Jordan Love Love because he needed QB help. It
Yeah.
might have been cheaper for him to find a Joshua Dobbs, and Joshua Dobbs could outperform Jordan Love the rest of the year. So there is that potential where you have a Joshua Dobbs type of player and you can go get more from a different player who does need that Band-Aid fix. So I think you're right. You know, maybe you didn't have to bundle it all together in one deal just to get it done. But overall, I do think that I prefer the value on the bottom side of the trade with Ragnar. And ultimately, though, I don't think it's like a major finesse. I think a lot of these assets are going to lose a lot of value pretty quickly. And so I don't think it's a major finesse or anything, but I do prefer the Joshua Dobbs and James Conner, Kyron Williams side of this deal.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Hell, me and you just made a Band-Aid trade. So, yeah, you just kind of have to just take advantage of those peaks and valleys of other teams during the season and see what you can get from them. I mean, that's the only thing really.
But all right, guys, that is all we have for you guys today. That was 5 plus 1 bonus Dynasty Fantasy Football trades that we did grade for you guys today. Those are all submitted straight into our Discord. So make sure you join our Discord. It is free to join. That link is going to be in the description. But with all of that being said, War, I don't have anything else. We got to make sure the folks are out here doing the like or hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, doing all the YouTube stuff. But do you have anything for them? Where can they find your show? You got a show, a WWE show.
Yeah, you know, just go ahead and look up the Crimson Mass Show. Like, subscribe, follow. We try to release content every Sunday so we can get your best out there for all the shows of the week and give you our opinion on the world of professional wrestling. Crimson Mass Pro Wrestling with an Attitude.
All right, guys. Well, that is it. So we will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.